Before the video begins, I'd like to address a personal matter. Please join my Discord, where I regularly share smaller updates throughout the day about my new videos. Thank you, and now enjoy the video. This video falls under the fair use law. The following is a fan summary, for entertainment purpose, only, which is not intended to replace the original series. We do not own the anime, manhwa, or any of the artworks, all rights reserved to their respective owners. Please support the official release of this series. This is for people's enjoyment only. This video is not meant to infringe any of the copyrights. Shin stared with wide-open eyes at the small system window in front of him, momentarily forgetting the threatening situation he was in. Shortly afterward, another system window appeared next to the existing one, asking him if he wanted to view the reward he had received as a player for his awakening. Shin still didn't fully grasp what was happening and was uncertain about the meaning of the terms player and reward. Suddenly, however, reality caught up with him. His body adapted to the underwater environment, and he frantically tried to breathe, but struggled in vain, only emitting bubbles. Unstoppably, he sank into the depths of the lake, but managed to maintain composure and close his mouth with his last strength. Even though he wasn't sure of what was happening around him, Shin had to make a decision. Since he had no other choice and his situation couldn't get any worse, he chose to answer the mysterious message with a yes and accept his reward. He reached out his hand and selected the yes option on the mysterious system window, causing it to glow brightly. Out of nowhere, sword-like, glowing spectral weapons appeared before Shin. One by one, he raised them from the lake, now standing at the edge of the abyss. As he took the final step and emerged onto the surface of the cave, he caught sight of the crystalline golem that had previously chased him through the cavern. A small, luminous blue aura hovered around Shin. And his posture differed significantly from his previous battle against the golem. The system window that appeared after Shin chose to receive the reward for his awakening as a player explained that he would absorb the experience from his previous life. In a trance-like state, Shin stood before the golem, motionless and without the slightest movement. No emotions could be discerned on his face, neither hatred, sorrow, nor fear. His body became increasingly enveloped in an aura of vibrant blue mana, which was unusual considering Shin didn't possess much mana due to his rank. Shin's unusually calm demeanor left the golem unaffected. Without wasting much time, the golem launched another attack. Suddenly, in the midst of the attack, Shin opened his previously closed eyes, now flashing blue due to the immense mana surging through. A system window announced that the reward was now fully distributed. All around Shin, sword-like spectral weapons continued to appear out of nowhere. This time, they weren't serving as a staircase but were deployed offensively. The blades pointed directly at the crystalline golem, ready to dismember it into its small crystal components. With insane speed, all the weapons flew toward the golem, critically hitting it, preventing it from executing its previously prepared attack. Shin's impressive attack threw even the massive crystalline golem backward, inflicting significant damage. However, Shin, who suddenly experienced a tremendous surge in his powers and had not yet had time to deal with the other memories now emerging in his mind, suffered from severe headaches. He clutched his head with his hand to better control the pain. Confused about why he was suddenly experiencing such pain, Shin tried to understand why unfamiliar memories were surfacing in his mind, memories he hadn't lived himself. Due to the intense pain, Shin momentarily forgot that he was still in the midst of a battle. However, as he perceived the pain and gradually refocused on things other than the headaches, he noticed that the golem had also somewhat recovered and was gearing up for a counterattack. The golem charged towards Shin, swinging its right fist for a mighty blow. Due to the force of the blow, a tremendous amount of air was simultaneously pushed away. However, even this powerful attack from the golem couldn't hit Shin anymore. Instead, it rebounded against a mana-like shield that Shin had created using his magic. Behind this protection, he stood unharmed in safety. At that moment, he could hardly believe that such an attack from the golem had caused him no harm and that his shield could withstand even a golem-type monster without breaking. However, Shin had to realize that he had to exert more and more effort to maintain the shield as the golem didn't stop applying pressure on it. This led to the shield being destroyed a few seconds later. Nevertheless, Shin managed to evade the golem's attack, even though it was surprising for him that his shield was destroyed. While Shin was dodging the golem's attack, he began to understand and utilize the memories in his head. It became clear to him that if the memories were true, he would have the exact strategy to defeat a golem-type monster. He knew the weaknesses and necessary tactics, understanding, for instance, that a monster class like this had no direct weak point. Without giving Shin a moment to catch his breath, the golem continued its attacks undeterred, relentlessly advancing. Shin was aware that even in the case of significant damage to the golem, it could heal itself through its regenerative abilities. Since his current opponent belonged to the golem-type category, he revealed another ability called Grid World. Immediately, a grid pattern could be seen in his eyes, and the world around him seemed to be divided into finer boxes. Thanks to his memories, Shin knew that overcoming the golem's regenerative ability required inflicting substantial damage from various angles simultaneously. The Grid World ability supported Shin in this endeavor. It placed Shin at the center of a large grid that overlaid the world. Each box had the same radius and distance from one another. Immediately after the grid spread out in front of Shin, he created more spectral swords using his other magic. These swords poised themselves to rain down on the golem from different angles, aided by another ability granted to him by Grid World, allowing him to freely move his creations within the center of this grid as he wished. After Shin had created enough of these spectral swords, he signaled them by clenching his fist to attack. Determination was evident on his face, intending to end this battle and avenge his friends. Immediately, the swords followed the given command with impressive speed and descended upon the golem. The force and speed they developed during their approach to the golem triggered a massive explosion, kicking up dust. As the dust slowly settled, the first thing Shin saw was the claws of the golem lying on the ground. A few seconds later, as the remaining dust cleared, it became apparent that the entire golem and its components lay defeated on the ground, and even its regenerative ability could not help in the face of the damage. Shin slowly approached the golem's face and looked down upon it. He breathed a sigh of relief and was glad to have won the battle. While he gazed down at the defeated golem, he recognized that his ability, Grid World, served not only to create his creations more quickly but also had the potential to function as an offensive capability if further improved. Suddenly, out of nowhere, another censored system message appeared, informing Shin that he had defeated a boss. As Shin looked at the system window, he noticed that he couldn't read any further information about the dungeon or the just defeated monster. However, he observed that something was happening on the debris of the golem. A lilac aura gathered from the golem's debris, flew towards Shin, and compressed into a small lilac sphere. Another system window appeared, explaining that Shin had automatically used one of his abilities, leading to magic absorption. The remaining magic within the golem was drawn out and formed the small lilac sphere now hovering in Shin's hand. Shin couldn't believe what had just happened and questioned himself about the meaning of it all and what he held in his hand. After Shin successfully absorbed the lilac sphere into himself, he continued to gaze at his hand, trying to piece by piece contemplate everything he had just experienced in his thoughts. Firstly, it occurred to him that memories from his previous life were now in his head. Although he didn't precisely understand what all of this meant and what exactly was meant by the previous memories, he clearly recognized that the person in his memories was definitely himself. More specifically, he knew that these memories were a few years into the future, in a world completely destroyed, with only the remnants of a once thriving civilization evident in a few ruins. Shin also recalled some things that now seemed too dreadful to contemplate. Apart from his memories, he also had the experiences and knowledge of his future self. However, Shin knew beyond that, even if this was the future, it might not be the same future he was currently in. An indication of this was that there were currently too many things out of their proper place. An example was that Shin could summon a system window listing his abilities from top to bottom. This was something he couldn't do in his previous life, and only now, as he gazed at the system window, did he realize that he had indeed become a player. Shin knew that players were those chosen after their awakening. However, he was also aware that, if he could trust his memories, at this point in his world, there shouldn't be any players yet. It was only in 2 years that a small number of awakened individuals would be chosen to become players. Among them was Moon, the assassin, who unfortunately lost his life in the battle with the crystal-like Golem. Only those who became players could see the system-like window, others could not perceive it. Therefore, Shin and his friends in the alternative future were surprised when they saw what their leader was staring at, as they couldn't perceive the window themselves. Shin remembered that in this alternative future, things like a system window were more mocked and considered a kind of joke that people didn't believe in. Thus, many of the awakened were shocked and they discovered that this mysterious thing actually existed. Nevertheless, this system was not the only thing given to the so-called players. Regardless of the system, each player received an additional reward. They gained much stronger powers and abilities, independent of the powers they already possessed as awakened individuals. The system and the rewards these individuals received seemingly out of nowhere were responsible for these players experiencing explosive growth and becoming much stronger than other awakened individuals. Shin remembered that, thanks to Moon, the guild leader of the Dawon Guild who was chosen as a player in the alternative future, he was responsible for turning his guild into one of the top guilds. Even though Shin had no direct connection to this guild in the alternative future. This steadily growing guild was one reason he had become so strong. At first, Shin wasn't particularly confident when he heard about this guild, but it was precisely this community that had made him so strong. Shin also discovered that in the system skills window, he could see all the abilities he had acquired in his past. Even in the past, he had found this ability very practical, but now that he could apply it himself, he could hardly believe how useful it truly was. Shin compared the abilities and knowledge he had taken from his previous life with those he saw in the window. In doing so, he realized that the ability he had applied to the golem's corpse did not come from his previous life. It was the passive ability of magic absorption, ensuring that collecting a certain amount of energy from contaminated mana found in dungeons would lead to further rewards. Shin was aware that he had never heard of such an ability and wondered if it was a unique gift that was unique to him alone. He carefully read through the description of the ability and already had an idea of what energy might be meant, but he intended to think more about it later. For him, the most important thing now was to properly recover his friends, with whom he now shared far more memories than just a few hours ago, and to bury their bodies decently. As he looked at the bodies of his friends, the pain on Shin's face was evident. As well as the fact that he would have preferred to begin mourning for his friends. After recovering his friends and reporting to the Hunter Association headquarters, Shin set off on his way. The headquarters was an impressive square building with multiple floors in the heart of the city. As Shin made his way, 2 agents of the Hunter Association observed him through the blinds. An orange-haired woman asked her superior if it was really okay to just send Shin home like that. The superior was somewhat surprised by this question and inquired why she was asking him such a thing. Both continued to watch Shin as the orange-haired woman explained that it seemed strange for a small guild to be attacked in the midst of an unconfirmed dungeon, with 4 out of 5 members losing their lives in the attack. She also found it peculiar that the sole survivor of the attack was a simple Class D supporter. She further explained to her superior that she could understand it if Shin had simply run away while his comrades fought for their lives. However, this was not the case, as Shin had evidently even taken care of the dead bodies of his comrades and properly informed the association about the incident. The woman noted that they couldn't secure any further evidence, the gate had already disappeared, and they couldn't verify Shin's story. Despite her explanation, she asked her superior once again what he thought of the whole situation, emphasizing once more that she believed something fishy was going on. After hearing her doubts, the superior sarcastically asked if she really believed that a Class D-ranked hunter working as a supporter could defeat his comrades. He playfully tapped her head with a small file and told her to wake up, as this was not a civil case. In addition, the senior pointed out that she knew very well that even if something suspicious was going on, they couldn't gather any clues in the dungeon. They could only secure the evidence that gradually came to light. The orange-haired employee didn't fully accept this and, due to the tap with the small file, already had tears in her eyes. She tried to alleviate the pain on her head with her hands. The senior continued and asked if she had any other concerns but also explained to her that such incidents had been occurring more frequently lately. As he turned away from his employee, he explained what he meant by more and more hunters finding gates but not reporting them to the association. In such cases, the gate and the right to conquer the dungeon within would be auctioned off, and these hunters would only receive a small portion of the proceeds. That's why more and more were risking their lives, independently entering these dungeons without prior notice. The senior, contemplating Shin's case further, clenched the file in his hand tighter. From his experience, he knew that it was nearly impossible for a small, unknown guild to conquer such a dungeon, and it was akin to a gamble with death. As he continued down the corridor, leaving his employee alone in the hallway, he called out from a distance that she could arrange for another meeting or something similar with Shin if she wasn't satisfied with what they had already learned. The orange-haired employee understood her senior's standpoint, thanked him for his time, and bid farewell. The senior walked down the corridor alone, illuminated by the evening sun, and looked into the file. As he did so, he couldn't help but think of Shin. Murmuring, he repeated Shin's name over and over, pondering that even after all that had been said, this case didn't feel like a normal one. The senior found the situation quite understandable and could relate to many aspects of it. Nevertheless, he had a lingering feeling that something was amiss. Initially, he pondered that Shin's demeanor during the investigation and questioning had been far too calm. Given his lack of experience in a dungeon and the tragic ordeal he had gone through, it would have been normal to expect a more agitated and panicked reaction. Furthermore, the senior thought that the connections Shin explained regarding the events in the dungeon were coherent and clear, even though some details were omitted in between. However, he was aware that this might be attributed to the personality of the person being questioned, having dealt with such individuals in the past. Nonetheless, certain doubts lingered, preventing a clear vision of the future. He knew that something didn't add up, even if he wasn't exactly sure what it was. This gnawed at the senior, and he found it frustrating. Eventually, he took a deep breath and reminded himself that this had nothing to do with him, and he shouldn't worry about it at the moment. As the senior and his orange-haired colleague conversed, Shin exited the building. He crossed a small bridge and strolled along the street, glancing at his phone. The setting sun bathed the horizon in a radiant golden orange. Shin's first instinct was to search for specific things on the internet using his phone. The more he contemplated the dungeon he had explored with his former group, the stranger it seemed that it was an unconfirmed gate. Shin found it peculiar since his memories indicated that this dungeon did not exist before, and his group always made sure to officially acquire dungeons they intended to conquer through auctions. This dungeon was no exception, it bore the official stamp of the association, even though it contradicted the fact that this gate was never sold by the association and was an unconfirmed gate. Shin pondered whether someone had infiltrated the association and deceived the Dawon Guild or if the association was directly involved. However, while Shin continued to look at his phone, he was not only disturbed by the situation with the association but also by the growing issue of missing individuals in unconfirmed dungeons. He came across a post on his phone that reported precisely such an incident. The unease in Shin's thoughts grew as he realized that the missing individuals were all future players, including his former guild master, Moon Doyun. Some of them were destined to play a crucial role in the future and become heroes in history. Suddenly, Shin halted, realizing that someone had to ensure these promising individuals had no room to become heroes. He gazed at the golden sunset towards the city and made the decision to conceal his abilities. Currently, he was the sole survivor of a mysterious case where others had inexplicably disappeared. Shin knew that any peculiar behavior could lead him to appear directly on the radar of the culprit. Nevertheless, in that moment, he considered what the next sensible step would be. With a time frame of 2 years until the first selection of players, he aimed to mobilize and develop all his abilities by then. To get a rough overview, Shin extended his hand, summoning several system windows that formed a circle around him. Shin's plan was to find a way to become stronger and grow without attracting too much attention. He sifted through the system windows to find a useful ability, carefully selecting it with his index finger.